Hello and welcome to Opening the Word for the first Sunday of Advent. And in these 4 weeks of Advent, we are preparing for the coming of Jesus Christ to Christmas. And we enter into biblical salvation history and the 4,000 years of humanity's yearning and longing for the coming of a Savior. And in our gospel reading today, we are hit with a very powerful message from Jesus, one that's going to shake us up. It's going to wake us up to help us to get ready. In this gospel reading today, we hear Jesus talking about the sun and moon darkening. We hear him talking about the stars falling from the sky. And many Christians interpret this as being all about the end of the world, the end of time. I want you to know that biblically, these images wouldn't have been brand new to the original hearers of this message in Jerusalem that day when Jesus spoke them. And they wouldn't have been new to the earliest Christians that were reading these, because these were found in the Old Testament scriptures as well. And they were used not literalistically to talk about the end of the physical time-space universe, but as many biblical scholars have noted, they were used to describe the end of kingdoms and nations and rulers who were oppressing God's people, the Israelites. For example, in Isaiah chapter 13 and in chapter 14, we read about these kind of images used to describe the destruction of the Babylonian kingdom and the fall of the great Babylonian king. And the ancient Hebrews would use this image as a powerful metaphor to describe just how shocking that would have been. Babylon was the most dominant power in the Middle East in that day, and for a prophet to talk about that nation falling would have been shocking. And so they used these powerful images to describe the fall of this great kingdom. It's kind of like in our own culture today. We might say that September 11th, 2001 was an earth-shaking event. And it wasn't physically that all around the world, but we use that to describe just how dramatically that shook up the social political landscape of our modern era. Or we might say that the first shot of the Revolutionary War was the shot heard around the world. We don't mean it was literalistically heard around the world, but we use that as a metaphor to describe how important that was historically. Well, the same is true for the ancient Jews. They use these powerful images to describe God's judgment on powerful nations that were oppressing God's people. Now, let's take a look at the context and the way Jesus uses this kind of imagery in our gospel reading for today. This reading comes from the last week of Jesus' life when he's in Jerusalem and he's confronting the Jewish leaders in Jerusalem. And he uses this imagery to describe what's going to happen to them. It's announcing judgment on Jerusalem. Ironically now, the Jerusalem leaders are the ones that are oppressing God's righteous man, Jesus, the Savior, the Messiah, who's about to be condemned and put to death and handed over to the Romans by these Jewish leaders. And Jesus is announcing that, yes, you're going to persecute me, but in the end, I'm going to be exalted, I'm going to be vindicated, I'm going to be raised, and God is going to come back in judgment on Jerusalem. Now, what is the message we can take away for our lives from these readings? I think about one line from today's gospel reading where Jesus talks about how the Son of Man will come on the clouds and he's going to come in glory and in power. Well, that imagery of the Son of Man is taken from a prophet of the Old Testament, the book of Daniel, chapter 7, where Daniel gives a prophecy, he has a vision of these 4 pagan kingdoms that are coming to oppress God's people. God's people are being persecuted. And yet, at the very end of this vision, Daniel sees that a Son of Man figure is going to come in judgment and in glory, and he's going to establish a worldwide kingdom. And so the message of Daniel 7 is the message of suffering and persecution, and how God is going to come and rescue his people, and he's going to vindicate them, he's going to rescue them, he's going to exalt them. And that pattern Jesus is applying to himself. He's saying, I'm now being persecuted, I'm being oppressed by the Jerusalem leaders, and God's going to raise me up, and I'm going to be vindicated, and God's going to come in judgment on Jerusalem. So let me ask you, how do you respond when you see many bad things happening all around you, whether it's in our world today, attacks on marriage, on human life, on religion? How do you respond? Or maybe in your own personal life, you have family members and friends who don't understand your Christian way of living, or you're trying to make some great things happen, advancing God's kingdom. You wish things were going faster at your parish, or other people would understand the faith better. How do you respond when you see things not working out the way that you desire? Do you respond with discouragement? Do you get angry? Do you get bitter? Do you just complain about all the bad things happening around you? How do you respond? Today's gospel message is meant to give us hope, because Christ's followers are meant to be followers that have confidence in God working through the difficulties and trials and persecutions that we as Christians face today. We should have confidence that the Son of Man is coming in glory and in power, and He's going to make all things new. He's going to be the one that will set things right in this world all the way until we get to the next. So as we leave this gospel reading, let's take time to think about the areas in our lives where we may fall into that trap of discouragement and negativity, where we lack the confidence that the great saints and martyrs had. Those great saints and martyrs were marked with that great hope in the Son of Man coming in glory.